Last time Jackson State and Southern faced off, it didn't even count towards the SWAC conference record. This time, it's for the SWAC title. Oh yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, I am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at the only HBCU that actually has a chance at making the FCS playoffs and what they need to do. Segment 2, we'll take a look at the Howard Bison. This is not the team. Spoiler alert, this is not the team. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that their offense has failed them in big games. Let's look at that trend. I have 3 games in particular that I want to take a look at. But we kick this thing off with the SWAC, baby. SWAC Championship Game, the Boombox Classic. If you enjoyed it in 2024, you don't have to wait until 2025. You just have to wait until December because Jackson State versus Southern is going to be our 2024 SWAC Championship Game. And it's interesting to me because it's the second time that this has happened recently. Remember, Eric Dooley ended up playing this game in his first year at Southern, if I'm not mistaken. So they're not unfamiliar, obviously, but they're also not unfamiliar with playing with this high stakes on the line. This will be a very interesting game. I can't wait to watch it. Of course, I know who I have as my favorite, but how did these two teams get here? Because they still got a whole nother week. It's not like the SWAC Championship Game is upcoming. They have a week of action. Then you got another week of action in which Southern will play. So Jackson State will play Alcorn this week. Southern will play Grambling next week in the Classic. Like, it's, you know what I'm saying? So we have time to spare. But how did we get here? I think for both teams, kind of similar to South Carolina State, you knew what it was going to be midway through the season. I'd say for Southern, when they beat Alcorn, was the moment I realized they're going to be in the SWAC Championship Game. And if they didn't, it wasn't going to be Alcorn that caught them. And that was just my prediction based off looking at the schedules. And I mean, hey, usually I say I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but they say self-love is the best love. So I'm going to pat myself on the back with both hands now. This is my thing. When I looked at that win by Southern over Alcorn on Southern's homecoming, that felt like the deciding moment because it gave you a lead. And you look at the rest of the schedule, Texas Southern, Prairie View, Alabama State, Jackson State. My prediction was and is that Alcorn would knock off PV, they would knock off Texas Southern, but they would lose to Alabama State and they would lose to Jackson State. The only one that hasn't happened is Jackson State. The other 3 have happened, and they were correct. That's how it played out. For Southern, I'm looking at them like, okay, they lost to FAMU. Expected that, especially at the time. Maybe if this was this FAMU, I wouldn't have expected that. But at the time, I said, okay, they're probably going to lose to FAMU. Cool. They did that. Lost to the Rattlers. Then they rattled off victories against Alabama A&M, Bethune-Cookman, and UAPB. I expected them to do that. I expected them to beat every one of those 3 teams that they played, right? So to me, this is not shocking. To me, the moment I realized that Southern would be in the SWAC Championship Game was when they beat Alcorn. I looked at that as really a SWAC West. I don't think I looked at it that way going in because there was a lot more teams. I think I even still was high on Grambling. Dang, this is a month ago. So I would have to remember what everybody's record was, but even Grambling probably wasn't out the mix. So I'm thinking they're going to bounce back. But anyway, this last game that Southern played, they saved all their style points for this one, and I think that that's good because against Alabama A&M, it was close. You had a last minute touchdown, and the Bulldogs tried to drive down for their own drive, and against Bethune Cookman, it was rallying in overtime and all of these things. And against PV, you had to go catch them and beat them in OT. That wasn't a part of this stretch, but still, there was a lot of times when like, man, they playing real close, and you're not blowing my socks off while you're doing it, but you're getting the job done. So I mean, I gotta show you some love for that. You solid for that. But you wanted to see them look like a championship team, and I felt like this week they did that against UAPB. And I have commended Jackson State for going on there and dominating bad teams. I have to do the same for Southern because they knocked off UAPB 31-9. And that's their largest SWAC victory. They had a freaking 70-yard touchdown. They had a big man return a fumble for a touchdown. This was greatness, okay? For Jackson State, on the other hand, I don't think that I really realized. I think I assumed, I believed that they would be the SWAC representatives. But the thing about it is, I was never overly sold that they were going to beat Alabama State. If you would have asked me, I would have picked Jackson State. But as Kareem Key started making some plays, I thought to myself, this is not going to be an easy game. And if it's played the right way, Alabama State could sneak out with it. But then when Bama State and FAMU lost last week, I said, okay, well, yeah, this is going to be Jackson State. They're not going to lose to Bama State and Alcorn. Maybe they lose to one. I don't know. But they're not going to lose to both. Then they played Bama State. And they played Bama State in the game that Alabama State wanted. If you're a Hornet, you could not have asked for a better setup than 16-10. That is the type of game you wanted to play, and I would say it was the type of game that Jackson State wanted to avoid. I believe no matter what the situation is, if you're talking about style of games, that is the edge will always go to Jackson State. But at the same time, a low 16-10, only 3 scores, right? Like 5 total. You're not looking at much scoring. That lended itself to Alabama State wanted that. I'll say that. It didn't lend itself to anything because I still expect Jackson State to make the play when they need to. But that is your route to winning. And Jackson State won and they still won. That Alabama State defense, they didn't play around with Irv Mulligan. This was something I wanted to watch, and they came in with a concerted effort. I thought they were a much better tackling team. I thought that defensive line of Alabama State did a phenomenal job. They won that battle wholeheartedly. There wasn't many carries where Irv Mulligan was getting 3 yards down the field before he was touched. Wasn't many he was getting 2. And it was a lot where he was getting hit in the backfield. If I would have to go track it, I would probably say there was more tackles or more times he was getting hit at or behind the line of scrimmage than 2 yards or further. That's what I would say. That's what I would have to guess. But I agree with that. I agree with that idea. And it's like, hey, Irv Mulligan can't beat us. And then you get into trying to drop back and pass. Jacoby and Morgan only had 13 passes, but that's because he was sacked 6 times. That defensive line was putting in work, but it was the Jackson State pass rush at the end of the game that made the play. Deep in the end zone, Kareem Key standing there. He gets sacked by Ashton Taylor. Boom. That's game. Give the ball back to JSU up 6 points, and they're able to just go ahead and drain the clock. So Jackson State is the best team in the SWAC, in my opinion. But this was always going to be a good game because of the defense of Alabama State. Sucks for him, man. Sucks for him. But you got to look at Jackson State as a team that no matter what you throw at them, they are the best team. So you have to throw so much and more. You just have to be better than this team. And that wasn't the case on Saturday. They can win any style of game. They have a defense in which if you shut down their offense, their defense can win them the game. I genuinely believe that. And I know that Alabama State isn't some high-powered offense, but I genuinely believe that Jackson State has the best scoring offense in the conference. They can run it up on you. They have a great scoring defense. I think it's top 2 in the conference. They can shut you down. So you got to pick your poison. You have to really pick your poison. So to me, The two big plays were Jackson State's punt return that put him in position for the first touchdown, and then obviously that sack in the end zone that led to a safety that closed it out by Ashton Taylor. This was a great game, but one thing that wasn't great is Howard's offense, and it's been like that in three pivotal matchups: North Carolina Central, South Carolina State, and Rutgers. I know. Why did I include Rutgers? Let me break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Roy. Now, listen, Locked On HBCU fans, you need to download the Roy app today because you've heard us talk about Roy this season and how they revolutionized the NIL industry. Well, Roy allows you, the fan, to say who gets the NIL money. And here's what I absolutely love about Roy: if your player transfers, you get your money back. Roy is helping us keep our game intact and is actually good for the long term. Think about Jared Washington, who gets back-to-back interceptions returned for a touchdown, right? Let's say he does that. And people say, oh, I got to watch him. Now let's go get him to South Carolina. We throwing money at him. It's not as much of an appeal. So you can show your support for Washington by downloading the Roy app, or you can go to joinroy.com. Use the promo code Locked On, no matter if it's on the app or on the website. Every athlete from every team is there. No purchase is necessary, void where prohibited, and join or go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players and change the game. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is the only place that I go get any of my tickets. And I'm not just talking about football. But let's say you want to go to the SWAC Championship. All you have to do is look up Jackson, Mississippi, look up the December 7th date, and it'll be there. And you'll have the best prices. Because with Game Time, not only are you able to have the best prices, you get the all-in prices. It's my favorite thing because one of my pet peeves is when you go somewhere and they try to give you all these hidden fees after you done checked out. Like, man, that's not what I bought it for. I bought this for $60 a ticket. How is it now 80? Right? Like, and those fees and it all adds up. With Game Time, it's all in. So if it's 80, after you add those fees, you're going to see 80. That's what I appreciate, the upfrontness of it all. So you go ahead and download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code Locked On College. You get $20 off your first purchase. Go ahead and take advantage of the all-in prices. Do that right now as I'm speaking to you. Go to download the app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football to break down the biggest news on a national field because we're getting closer and closer and closer to the CFB playoffs. So you want to make sure that you're checking in and tuning in for that. So Howard offense, they failed them in 2024, and that doesn't start with the players, right? That does not start with the players. It starts with the coaches because they've made terrible decisions. These have been really bad decisions that has the offense executed greatly? No, they haven't. And I think a lot of it has to do with the quarterback position, of course. But they also have not been put in the best positions to succeed, and that is the problem. As a coach, it is not on your job. It's not your job for execution. It's your job to make sure that when they execute what you said to do, it works out. That is the job of the coach, and also to develop and all of those things, and to get the right people in there. But I can trace this back to week one. Week one against Rutgers. I'm not expecting them to beat Rutgers, but what do? They make some plays defensively. Kenny Gallup looks good. That's probably the best thing for getting Gallup drafted. Honest and truly, that is probably the best thing for getting Gallup drafted because he played and has a couple of good plays against Rutgers. That's Power 4 competition. The offense couldn't get anything going. Do I blame them for that? No, I do not blame them for not being able to get anything going on Rutgers. But what I do say is, I saw the defense make a couple of plays. The offense didn't. Keep that in the back of my head. I don't even know why that registered to me because I typically write a lot of things off when you play Power 4 teams, but I didn't this time. Let's also remove the Hampton game because Jay-Sean Scroggins didn't play that game. I look at these last 2 weeks, the two biggest MEAC games. Excuse me. The two biggest MEAC games for Howard were South Carolina State, because at that time it was clear who the best team was, and you're trying to knock them off so that now you can maybe get yourself into the race and be the leader of that race. Then North Carolina Central. In these two games against North Carolina Central and South Carolina State, Eden James and Jared Hunter combined for 12 carries total in both of those games apiece. 12 against South Carolina State, 12 against North Carolina Central. That is not players, that is play calling. That is not about execution, that's about decision making. And the fact that you're putting so much pressure on Ja'Shawn Scroggins is a questionable decision. It is. At one point, he was not your starting quarterback in the middle of the year. I remember the conversation. Should we go with I can't remember the guy's name, Tolbert? Should we go with Scroggins? Like, I remember that being a thing. I don't think I'm misremembering it because of health, right? But regardless, because I remember he was healthy and he registered a stat in one game. I watch so many teams, sometimes it gets distracted. But the point is, regardless if he was being questioned or not, he was not playing great this year. So then it begs the question, why would you abandon your running backs to go to a quarterback who's not playing great? Why would you put that much pressure on him? Is it because he balled out against Delaware State? Did you see that game and say, oh, well, he can handle everything? I think that's poor decision making. Your best offensive weapons are Casey Hawthorne, Jared Hunter, Eden James. That's it. Those are your three best weapons, and two of them play running back. Hand the ball off to your running back. Like, there wasn't enough running against North Carolina Central. 12 carries for Eden James? That's a solid day. 12 carries for Jared Hunter. Seeing that he's your lead back, he'd like it to be bumped up. But 12 carries for Hunter and James combined? We tripping. We are not performing. We are not setting up the players to perform. You're just not. When I look at this game, North Carolina Central was driving down the field and got stalled out 3-4 times. How many times does Howard have to block a field goal, create a turnover on downs, catch an interception? Howard's defense the last 2 weeks have done what they needed to do. I don't care what the score reflects. They kept them in that game early. They blocked a couple of field goals. You got to pay that back. When it comes against South Carolina State, the Bulldogs, they catch an interception in opponent territory. So Howard's already starting with their back against the ropes defensively twice. Do they allow any points? No, not even a field goal. You can't keep letting them make these type of plays, and you sit back here like, with the hands up, palms up. I don't want to see palm up attitudes. And that's what I felt like out of Howard's offense. It's not that they were making excuses. It's the fact that I personified them to be like, what you want from us? I want you to produce. I want you to give the ball to Eden James. I do. Jared Hunter was getting his touches at various moments. It didn't happen in these two games. But I never felt like Eden James got his just due. I just wasn't a fan of that. That was terrible to me. This is a quarterback who's clearly been struggling. And you say, oh, we want you to drop back and throw it a bunch of times. No, run the football, make it easy on your quarterback. That's what a good coach would have done. Those weren't good coach moments with how they treated that quarterback in the offense, in my opinion. Straight up. I'm not blocking any, or I'm not holding back anything. I don't think those were good coaching moments. Now, I want to move forward. Central's one of the teams I want to look at. But I have a specific team in mind that is a true candidate to make the FCS playoffs. Let's look at how and why as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. And listen, I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not about to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy, no hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless with just $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out It really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. I said, hey, we can't do this no more. Click. Right? Like I've been waiting on the hold for 5 minutes. I done been wanting to get to Mint Mobile. So to get started, you go to mintmobile.com/locked on college. There, right now, you'll see all 3-month plans are $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with your existing contacts. No need to do all the switching and swapping. To get this new customer offering your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/locked on college. That is mintmobile.com/locked on college. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/locked on college. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on the unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Merci. Merci. Pack it up, North Carolina Central. I love y'all. Great fan base. Phenomenal fan base, actually. One of my favorite in the HBCU landscape. There's no HBC or there's no FCS playoffs in your future this year. And you probably knew that because you've probably been curious a little bit longer than I have. But I put out a couple of feelers. I put out I made some calls, some text messages. It's just not happening for the Eagles. They don't have a quality win. I was not aware of how deep into the toilet that Campbell went after North Carolina Central beat them. So they were 2-3 at the time, I believe. They're 3-8 now. Campbell hasn't beat anybody. I think they beat A&T. I think that's about it, right? So they've been very poor since losing to North Carolina Central. So for that, you get no love. That's not valid. That's not a quality win. Now, Elon, let's see what Elon's record is as I look that up real quick. Elon just won their last game, and they beat William and Mary. They're 5-6. So even that loss isn't great. That's not like so basically out of conference was not great for Central this year the way that it was just a year ago. That's why it's not going to be there. I asked if the Campbell win was a needle mover at all, like even in the slightest. They said, no, Campbell's 3-8. That doesn't move any kind of needle. So I was told flat out they didn't have any quality wins. The school that we should be looking forward to, Tennessee State. Tennessee State has a chance to make it into the playoffs, win or lose, but the chance is heightened with a victory. This week, and I want to give a shout out to Eddie George because Eddie George has already won more games than he's won in the last 4 games, and he has one to spare. He's 2-1 right now. So at worst, he'll be 500. It's the last 4 that he hasn't had a losing record. He's been 1-3 in the last 4 games of his entire career. So salute Coach George. Hope to get you on the show one day. Let's set that up. But gotta put it in the air, shooting that shot. But they're currently sitting at 8-3. Tennessee State is currently at 8-3, and they could be 9-3. And from what I'm hearing, 9-3 gets them in, whether that's as an automatic qualifier or as an at-large. 9-3, more likely than not, will get them into this game. So that's the most important part. We can talk about winning the conference and all of that, but I want to make it clear that if you win this game, you may not win the conference, but what you will do is punch your ticket into the FCS playoffs. More likely than not. It's not guaranteed, but it's the likely outcome from who I'm talking to and what I'm hearing. The thing about it is, I don't know what happens with a 3-way tie. I do not know what happens with a 3-way tie. But what I do know is that if Tennessee State is able to knock off Southeast Missouri, at the worst, it will be a 3-way tie for the Big South OVC title between the 2 teams I just mentioned and then also UT Martin. Unfortunately for the Tigers, they lost to UT Martin. That was the game in which they were so close, but they weren't able to pull it out. That was that game. So, how this works is Lindenwood just beat Southeast Missouri 2 weeks ago. Then they had a bye week. We'll get to that in a second. But they just beat Southeast Missouri 2 weeks ago. They gave Southeast Missouri their first loss. If Tennessee State is able to knock off that squad, then now Southeast Missouri has 2 losses. Tennessee State has 2 losses. But one of those losses for Southeast Missouri is actually against Tennessee State. So that works in the favor of the Tigers. Then you got to factor in UT Martin, who plays Lindenwood. And if Lindenwood wins that game, it's simple. A Tennessee State victory gets you in the door. You are an automatic qualifier. You would win the conference and get that conference automatic qualifier into the FCS playoffs. But if UT Martin wins, then you got to have a 3-way conversation, and I don't know how that works. I'll have it for you tomorrow when we're talking about Tennessee State in our HBCU circuit. But right now, I don't know exactly how that plays out. What I do know is that whether you're an at-large or if you're an automatic qualifier, Tennessee State wins and they're in. More likely than not. If you win the championship, you're definitely in. That's a guarantee. As far as being 8-4, I was told that they'd still be on the bubble, but it'd be a much harder sell. So I can't wait. I'll be watching attentively. Tennessee State, Southeast Missouri, UT Martin, Lindenwood. Those 2 games are going to decide who gets the automatic bid, and it could decide whether or not the Tigers are able to make the playoffs for the first time in a while. All right. So in the meantime, between time, tomorrow's episode is the HBCU circuit. We'll be back with every single HBCU. So take care. Stay blessed. Peace.